That film independent, like independent filmmaking energy is so important to keep, because I think that there's a tendency in our craft, like as artists, like, okay, once you have an agent or once you have a manager or once you have a studio, they'll do all the work and you can just focus on the creative. But what I realized with social studies is I spent basically 4 years on the project. I saw it like flashing before my eyes, like DOA. Like I could see it wasn't connecting yet. And that's when we started like going to schools and doing social media and doing these other things. And we also had theatrical screenings for outreach, which was very against the conventional wisdom. Like we were filling theaters like idiots 6 months after it was already on TV.
We're going to go through a bunch of Lauren's projects, and we figured we would start with social studies, which I'll let you set up. But if you haven't seen it, we'll play clips or trailers from most of Lauren's films that we're going to talk about. So if you haven't seen them, hopefully that at least gives you a taste of all of them. But we wanted to start with social studies because it's the most recent, and it's the first episodic that you've done, is my understanding. So before we watch the clips and introduce the audience to the project, do you want to kind of tell how that idea germinated and what they'll be seeing?
Yeah, so social studies it was my first series. It's a 5-part series about how young people, teenagers, are affected by social media. And it was a kind of a social experiment where I worked with 12 kind of main characters and probably 25 kind of fully in the group, following them over a 1-year time period, with the agreement being that they needed to share their social media. And so we had access to all of their social media, and you'll see the social media animates the series and drives the narratives. So I'm going to show the trailer. So that's our first cue for lights.
Social media is kind of like the only way to communicate.
It's the only way you feel connected to anyone.
I could be myself.
I need a perfect body.
I can't get rid of it.
She was bullied.
That makes you want to beat up somebody.
It doesn't really end.
It becomes everything.
I always wanted to do this.
What did you hear me say?
I hope to document the first generation that had grown up with social media their entire lives.
What did you hear me say?
Teenagers from Los Angeles agreed to share their private accounts and their digital experiences.
School is starting.
How many of you were asked to send a nude of yourself?
If you put out content like Kim Kardashian did, maybe you'll get famous. My social media consumption is 12 hours a day.
You edit your body to be something it's not.
One of the major beauty standards is you kind of have to be Caucasian.
People would just call you the N-word. So I took action, and they took my whole account down.
It's frightening to see how sexualized some of these images are. I sort of don't want to look at my kids' TikTok. Gorgeous!
The more time I spend on social media, the more anxious I feel.
It is so scary that we are allowed to actually do this.
Social media has a role in everything, doesn't it?
It's hard to figure out what you want, but you know what social media is telling you to want. There's so much hate. It did affect me a lot.
Social media took a toll on me, but I'm not alone in this.
It's up to us to figure out how we can still be people.
So in terms of, we can turn the lights on, in terms of where it came from, oh, thank you. In terms of where it came from, in a way, it was like going back to my first book, Fast Forward, which is about kids growing up in LA, a photography book, and almost all my movies came from photographs or photography that I made. But bigger than that, it was kind of a way to go back to all of the themes that I had looked at throughout my work, from materialism to peer pressure to comparison culture to body image to eating disorders, to culture and kind of the contagious aspect of culture. So, in a way, social media, I had been looking at teenagers and popular culture and youth culture and gender, and all of the things were amplified on steroids in the social media age.
And how did you, well, let's talk about it being your first episodic, because there are a lot of characters in social studies, and it's incredible. If you guys haven't watched it, I rewatched it this week in preparation for this, because it is, as Maria said when she introed it, it is pretty haunting, but it's also like, to borrow the phenomenon from there, it's a little addictive. Like, I was so invested in all of these kids that I had to watch until the end. Even the relationship between, what's your protagonist? I remember his name, Boat. Yeah, just needed to know what happened to their relationship by the end. How did it become episodic, or was it always a vision for it to be episodic? And then how did you go about, I hate the term casting, but choosing your participants in the film?
Well, at first I didn't know whether it would be feature-length doc or episodic. And then when I I made a presentation, I did a little test. I was also testing the technology, which was very experimental, and we had to create. So after that, I pitched it to, and we had the opportunity for either a feature or a series. But the reason I really leaned into the series is for the depth. And actually, that's why I originally went from photography to filmmaking, as I've always really liked to do long-term, in-depth, embedded, even longitudinal projects. And coming up as a photographer, I did that by kind of focusing on my projects, but taking assignments from magazines over multiple years that fed my own personal project. So it might be 3 weeks here, or 2 weeks here, or 1 day here, but it was all part of like this bigger project called Girl Culture, for example. And so when I went to documentary, like my first film, Thin, we got to spend 10 weeks like basically living in an eating disorder clinic. And for this project, I wanted to spend 1 year. It's really important with teenagers and also with social media. Part of what I'm documenting is the performative quality of that. And so it's really important to have enough time so that I really understand what is performative and what's not, to correct for anything that might be playing to the camera, to find the characters and build the access so I really have their authentic selves as well as their performative selves, and can kind of like pull the curtain back on what that is. So I knew I needed time. And I also knew there were so many different, really, really pressing themes. I didn't know exactly what they would be. Like, we started those group sessions really just for my own research and information. I didn't know they would become a part of the film. But I was trying to find out from the kids, like, what are the big issues that you're dealing with? And when it became clear that it was like bullying and body image and eating disorders and suicidal ideation and sex ed and sexual assault, and kind of how this all becomes part of the stew of coming of age, I just realized like I needed time, and I also needed different characters because I wanted to see those stories unfolding in real time in the verite. And I also wanted enough diversity so that every kid and their parents could see themselves and see their own kids. And interestingly enough, the diversity ended up being really just like the background thing, because once we were finished and we started like showing it in schools and showing it in universities, and the kids in the show started coming out with me and talking to other kids, it was clear that kids didn't identify with the people that were like their race or gender or socioeconomic background or neighborhood. They identified with who had a bullying experience, who had a slut shaming experience, who had a boyfriend that like hacked them. Like, it was just about their relationship to social media.
And you mentioned the technology, because I know we have a lot of filmmakers in the audience, and when I watch social studies, and one of my longtime editors, Helen Kearns, worked on it with you, and I was like, holy shit, that looks like such a headache to edit this documentary, because as Lauren's talking about, she had access to their social media. So can you explain that technology, and maybe we watch one or two of the clips, because it's amazing, not only access, but it must have been so challenging in piecing your story together to have that element on top of the verite.
Definitely. I mean, I think that was also, you had asked about the selection of the participants, and there was also this element of self-selection, because not everybody, I did kind of mini interviews in the spring during COVID, like the spring before we started in the fall, with a couple hundred kids. And I was looking for their experience, their kind of background, their relationship with social media. But they were also deciding whether they were going to be comfortable in a project sharing their social media. And interestingly enough, when you see the show, you'll see that it's not a bunch of exhibitionists or influencers. Like, some of the kids who decided to be in it are actually very private. And so they really made this choice, whether it was because they thought the issue was important, or like in the case of Sydney, she had had a really intense slut-shaming experience that she wanted to share so that other people would maybe not have that kind of thing. There were a couple people who had skin in the game with social media, like Jack was a party promoter and YouTube star, and Keyshawn was a musician. So they maybe had more of a desire to have an audience, but most of the kids were like very shy, and this was really a kind of unusual step for them to be in, and something that they really took a risk on. And I think that having that year also really established trust, because they would all say when we were having Q&As after the whole thing was done, that even though the agreement was to share their social media, that sometimes they would say like, oh, I'm being filmed, don't like write anything, racy to me, like to their best friend or their boyfriend, don't send me a nude or something. And then by the end, they really were aligned in our mission, and they just started sharing everything, to the point of like downloading whole phones, whole chats, whole, picture archives. And they really, we really worked together on it. By the end, like, we're doing a museum show for next fall, and some of the kids are working on that too with me. Like, they really became a part of the outreach for it too.
Yeah, you feel that when watching. You feel an immense amount of trust, I feel like, especially with the generational gap, which is often younger people are untrusting of us. You feel a sense of trust being built throughout the film. What's the name of the young woman with the right-wing mother?
Oh, Ivy.
Ivy, yeah, like she's an incredible character, and I think it's really well suited for episodic, because there's sort of like these satellite characters, in the first episode that you get a taste of. They might talk to you in the group situation, then by episode 3, you're zeroing in on them, and you've seen them before, and then you're diving deep into that young man or young woman's story. Do you want to share a clip or two?
Yeah, I'm going to show this next one, which is in the episode about sex ed.
Growing up means fucking up, and that's how we learn. But to have our fuck-ups in a form that is so public and so susceptible to judgment and so permanent, because it doesn't go away, it is so scary that we are being allowed to actually do this. And the people who are running these sites, they know what they're doing, and they're doing it on purpose, because they want us to be on it, and because they make money off of us.
That is true.
So one of the things that I decided in the beginning was that I wasn't going to have any experts. I wasn't going to have any academics or tech people, that the kids were really the experts. And I think Sophia really speaks to that here. Like, they know exactly what's going on. And so one of the perspective things that's really different in this project from anything I've done before is that they're like multiple perspectives. They're like the experts, they're also the subjects. Like we see them in Verite lying, cheating,
Jumping out of windows of their parents' house. Yeah.
exactly, lying to mom, lying to boyfriend, and so we get to kind of have that like voyeuristic, fly on the wall verite part. And then we have these interviews where they really become truth tellers and just spill the beans and kind of narrate everything that's going on, which you really need because there's so much presenting and promoting and kind of dishonesty in the peer life and especially in the social media. And then their social media is a whole other layer of presentation. And then we have these group discussions, which is a kind of different form of truth telling where they're really talking very frankly and vulnerably with their peers. And for the first time, and why I really kept doing these group sessions is the kids really wanted it. Because for the first time, they were seeing that they were not alone. They interact with social media socially where they're like, oh my God, did you see this? He's with that person. What do you think about that? But they have never had a conversation with each other about how it made them feel and what they were dealing with. And that was like hugely relieving in the group. And I also thought that meant it could be the same kind of relief and identification for young people watching them.
Yeah, I love, and they don't have their phones in the group session, so they're like stripped of that in a way. I loved watching them. Can you talk about, since we have a lot of filmmakers in the audience, and one of the things, and we'll hit on this with multiple of your projects, is you've had to ride many waves of distribution because it's been such a changing landscape and somewhat cyclical in some ways over the last 20 years. With this one specifically, can you talk about how you pitched it, who you pitched it to? Did you pitch it as a feature and then pivot to episodic? Can you tell us about that process?
I mean, I should say we started filming in 2021, so it was very much the golden age of documentary.
Exactly.
And so we had the good fortune to be able to pitch to everybody. But one of the things that we talked about that my husband and producer is also here, Frank Evers. But one of the ways that we always work that I was talking to Ryan about yesterday is really developing a project before we bring it to anybody. And I was really moved by Gina Prince Blythewood's talk this morning, if any of you heard about it, in terms of protecting the vision of the filmmaker and how you do that. And for me in a documentary, I kind of follow my intuition. There's something I want to explore, but I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it. And I need the space and the safety to figure that out on my own terms before I have any like wah 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 wah. So, and then I try to avoid the wah 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 anyway, because I already like have my kind of, this is what I'm doing. Do you want to join us or not? So for this, we did about like 6 months or maybe a year of active development, but then we filmed something. We filmed a bunch of characters. We tested the technology. And the presentation reel that we made was almost like a short film. Like I felt like, okay.
Like how long?
It was probably like 20 minutes.
Which is long for what we call a sizzle in our
maybe
world.
It was 15.
Yeah.
But it was like very, like I had animation, I had music, like it was kind of like in my own mind, I'm spending months on this, and if I don't sell it anywhere, I'll have a short film. Like there's something here. So with that, we brought it to everybody, and we ended up working with FX. And part of the really amazing thing about working with FX is they are very filmmaker friendly. So I knew, there wasn't going to be notes from an algorithm. There wasn't going to be big rooms full of notes. There wasn't going to be, oh, can you do this for our audience? And that's just like not me. I always my projects are very self-directed, and I'm never thinking like, should I change this for an audience? Like I'm just thinking about how do I tell this story in the most clear and compelling way, and how do I get in deep, and how do I talk about something that I think is important in a way that can open hearts and minds, but also entertain so people watch. And in this case, I was thinking about, the only thing I was thinking about audience-wise is that I wanted to be able to speak to both young people and parents, and also kind of 30-somethings, 20-somethings and 30-somethings who knew both worlds. And so I did a lot of, I'll say my own testing. Like once we were in the edit, we would almost like every 2 weeks, and it would drive the editors crazy because every 2 weeks I'd have like a new set of notes, but we would test with a group of like at least 10 people, ranging from like filmmakers that I admired, or writers, or we had a supervising editor, Joe Beanie, who was fantastic, and kids. We had a lot of interns.
Would you send them links, or would you do it in a
No,
public
we did
forum?
it in person. We did it in person. We do everything in person because it's like another thing that drives the editors crazy these days, because it's something that really changed during COVID, but like I really believe in like being in the room. I'm pretty unusual on a series in the sense that I'm like editing all of the pieces, all of the episodes. And then the other thing that was really crazy from the producing side is I would not lock any episodes until they were all finished. Because like the first one is going to change when the last one is done. And once you find your ending, or a scene has to move. So getting that ready for festival and for TV was very challenging and pressurized. But I feel like it's what made the best kind of interlocking series.
Yeah, it's like I've done a few series and I always forget the moment I finish it. And then when I get back in one, it's like, oh shit, this is like finishing 5 films at the same time when you're having to finish it because of what you're saying, not locking them one by one because we're documentary filmmakers. We don't have scripts. One change to one episode might change another one. Do you want to share the Teen Line clip?
Yes. So this is in the last episode, and one of the characters, Jonathan, who you'll see, was a filmmaker himself. So it's kind of like a film within a film that he's making during the course of the series.
Hi, John. How old are you? You said 17? What's going on tonight? How long have you been feeling like this? Teen Line has data that shows that suicide is getting more popularized.
Do you think there was a specific correlation to social media and rise, anxiety, and depression?
Yes. I felt very, very lonely, and I had such trouble feeling comfortable in his own skin. Social media, in hindsight, I realized was the only outlet when you're isolated. I had been up for a couple of days, actually, quite late at night on social media. The isolation and then going down very dark rabbit holes really is a problem, wouldn't you say? I'd said to Rye, I said, I can't lovingly watch you throw your life away on the phone. And Rye responded very, very badly to it and got very upset. And I left the room and I phoned Rye's therapist. What I know now is I shouldn't have left the room. I went back to the room after a few minutes and the door was locked. 2 weeks before Rye died, Rye told me of a Reddit thread called Sanctioned Suicide. The thread will actually encourage you to end it, including instructions, how to get around parents, what to do. It was so horrifying to me. that moment, we need other alternatives. It was a spontaneous decision that Rai had made within 10 minutes, texted a friend who didn't respond right away.
Do you know what that last text that Rai sent was?
Yeah, I need to talk to a friend right now.
Social media is our lifeline, but it's also a loaded gun.
Sorry, that's a hard clip.
Yep.
That-
But it's a great example of what I was kind of saying in the intro, where your subject matters kind of may seem like they're going to be fun and poppy, and they are in some ways, and then they make you really feel and have a lot of humanity and artistry in the storytelling to them. And I think that one is very heavy, but great example of how you
And
do
that's
that.
in episode 5. And actually, if you do watch to the end, 5 is surprisingly hopeful. Yeah, because the kids, you know, like Jonathan saying, it's our lifeline, but it's a loaded gun. They're so smart. They really give us a pathway to a better world. It's like they're just saying exactly what the issues are and how to solve them. But they can't do it alone because it's so addictive, and because, like Sophia said, the people doing it have a great advantage in terms of knowing brain science and being engineers.
And this series looks at all the noise that these kids live with. And one of the things you and I were talking about yesterday, and you mentioned it to the time period when you were pitching this in 2021, which was kind of one of the best years to be pitching documentaries, you know, like the birth of the streamers in the late teens, and then they finally were understanding that documentaries can be very popular, and then there became kind of this feeding frenzy around those years, but which was incredible for some of us, but also was a double-edged sword, I think, because then it led to a proliferation of documentaries where there were so many available that it was really hard to cut through with a documentary, to cut through the noise and get people to watch your documentary because they were everywhere for a few years. So can you talk about how you promoted this film?
Yeah.
Like, I know you were in the trenches on it, really making sure it cut through, but can you talk
Yeah.
about that process for the past, year and a half, 2 years?
Yeah, it came out last fall. We premiered at Telluride Film Festival. So that was one of the things that I asked for, was the ability to be at a film festival.
Why? Like, why was that important to you?
Well, one of my teachers, Rob Moss, who's an amazing filmmaker, has a great film you should see this year called Bend in the River. He said that when you have something on TV, it's like dropping a quarter in the Grand Canyon. It's like you just don't know if anybody's seeing it. You know, when we did Queen of Versailles and we had a theatrical, we went to festivals around the world for like almost a year, and then we had theatrical, and then when it was like finally on TV after all of that. And the streamers are just not as invested in your film finding an audience as you are. It's kind of like an all-you-can-eat buffet. They want to fill it with a lot of cool stuff. Something's going to pop, something's not. They're going to promote what's going to pop. And they don't really care about bringing the individual film the way, like back in the day, like a Magnolia would care about getting butts in seats for a movie, because that's how they had to, that was their business
Or
model.
impact campaigns, which...
So I don't think it actually was because of the proliferation of documentary. I think that documentary is competing against TikTok and the news and a very loud and chaotic presidency and all kinds of different distractions in this like attention economy, where documentaries happen to be kind of at the bottom of the totem pole. And I think what our strategy was here was like news you can use. We really went with earned media. We did a lot of news media. We did a lot of podcasts. It was something that was of great interest to the news media, so that was lucky. But I did basically a solid like 9 months of news media, and then part of kind of keeping that going was different things that we were doing in outreach campaigns. We were visiting schools, we were visiting universities. We went and met with lawmakers in Sacramento. The kids came too. We got very active on social because we realized very quickly that young people are not watching ABC News or Nightline or even Drew Barrymore, but they're only on social. And actually, what we realize is that's the case for most people these days. And so we convinced FX to not just do their traditional marketing, but also do social media marketing. That really moved the dial. I got much more active on social media. Like the kids had me doing like these really dumb TikToks where we would like do a sound, and but we had fun with it too. And everything just amplified everything else. And and then we also did international festivals. And I think the main thing is we treated it like independent filmmakers. And I think that, that independent filmmaking energy is so important to keep, because I think that there's a tendency in our craft, like as artists, like, okay, once you have an agent or once you have a manager or once you have a studio, they'll do all the work and you could just focus on the creative. But what I realized with social studies is we spent 2 years editing this. So I spent basically 4 years on the project. Even after festival, even after we had hit all these big media news organizations, I saw it like flashing before my eyes, like DOA. Like I could see it wasn't connecting yet. There weren't enough people watching that it was becoming a conversation. And that's when we started like going to schools and doing social media and doing these other things. And then that drove social. Then more people saw it on social. We ended up connecting. We won a Gotham, and so we ended up connecting with the creators of Adolescence, who I just adore, and I adored that show. And they were like promoting ours too, because it was kind of like a similar subject. So we just used everything. The kids were amazing. They came to a million Q&As, and we also had theatrical screenings for outreach, which was very against the conventional wisdom. Like we were filling theaters like Vidiots 6 months after it was already on TV. But people just don't have time to like find everything on TV. And we found like if we were doing a fun screening where the kids were there and maybe like somebody from Common Sense Media and maybe like a cool moderator and maybe there's like a reception or free popcorn, like people wanted to come and discuss. And so we did a lot of outreach that way.
Incredible. Yeah, because that's so rare, not only for something that's on TV or streaming, but also something that's episodic, that you're filling up a theater with it. So did you see like a long tail of popularity with it, or like a long snowball growing?
It came out in September. I don't think we really broke through until the spring. And then the spring coincided with FX doing an Emmy campaign, so then we had billboards. And then at that point, between the kids and everything, we just had like a little outreach machine where if there was a billboard, okay, great, few people see it driving by, but then the kids would go there, they would like post about it, they would make a story, I would repost their story. Like we just made our own little ecosystem of social.
It's kind of more of the double-edged sword, because at least then if people have, I'm assuming it's on Hulu, if people have a Hulu subscription, they can still watch it, which you couldn't in the old days. You would still have to rent something or go see it in a theater or find it when it was coming on television. So it's also sort of one of the upsides to being on a streamer, even if you don't pop at the beginning, is that it's there as long as someone has a subscription.
The whole thing was a small miracle, because being on Hulu means you're also on Disney Plus. And when you see this show, like in the sex episode, they're talking about BDSM, they're talking about choking.
A lot of smoking pot.
A lot of smoking pot. Like, it's incredible that we like got this through
I did not know it was
Disney
on Disney Plus. That is a miracle. That is more than a small miracle.
And I think part of that was like I brought on the Annenberg Foundation. We made a educational curriculum that is free for high schools. And we really leaned into the educational part too, so that we could really go deep in telling the real stories without anybody thinking it was like euphoria sensational. Like it kept that purpose, but then it also allowed us to like be uncensored and just like show the real shit. And I think for young people, that was so important because they can see through the BS. Like they can see through, films that they feel like they're being lectured to, and they don't want to watch that. And a lot of the kids, and I would look for this in our test screenings, would say like, "How did you know that? Like that's our Snapchat map." And like Olivia Rodrigo, that music is like what we listen to. And so a lot of the things that kind of went over the heads of the parents, they were getting.
It's incredible. All right, well, let's move back in time because I want to go through a lot of your other films and we'll hit on all the same things, the distribution market at the time, the creative at the time. So do you want to show a clip from Thin, which is Lauren's first film, which came out 2006, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Which I rewatched this week as well. You'll see, because you're going to show the opening, right? It's like a pure verite documentary, very old school in that way. And so, well, let's show the clip and then we'll talk about it.
And I think, like, people are always like, how do you get access? But one of the things that's like the good and the bad of today is everybody's seen everything you've done when you meet them for the first time. But Thin and Girl Culture were important street cred for me with especially young girls or teenage girls. So this is the opening scene of Thin.
Kitty? Hello? Kitty? Alisa? Alisa?
Vitals and late today, Atta. I want to just see if there's any marks. Okay, and turn them over. Okay, turn around, please. Okay, now I need you to drop the back. Okay, all right. Are you feeling safe, Atta?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
97.4. More blue today. The capillary refill is good, but her nail beds are more blue than pink today, but her fingertips are warm.
(86/49). 42. What happened yesterday? I think you do. Did you eat dinner?
Yeah.
Have you been getting busy?
Yeah, I always do.
So that's the opening, and you become so invested in these young women throughout. By the end of the film, I like even found myself Googling them now, where you can find some of them, and I was like so happy to see the ones that are doing well. And of course, there's some tragic stories there. What's her name? Yeah, Polly, I think passed away, right? But like, this is I can't recommend this documentary enough. Not only for just being a pure verite film, and an access film, but just the sensitivity with which you made it. And it doesn't surprise me that that would give you street cred, because there's such sensitivity and humanity in Thin. But can you talk about, that's your first feature film at least, how, I saw Sheila Nevin's name on it. For those of you who don't know, that Sheila was the head of HBO documentary films for decades. That was like the grand dame of documentaries. I think my second or third film Sheila bought, and it felt like getting the golden ticket from Willy Wonka for me. That was 2013, I think. Yours is 2006. So how did this film come about? How did it end up in those hands as your first film, which is pretty rare?
Well, I worked with Kate Amend, who you also worked with, who's an amazing editor, and a DP named Amanda McKaylee. And it was my first film, but in a documentary, it's such a collaboration with your DP and your editor. So I kind of was hand in hand with them learning filmmaking. But I had come from a career in photography. So I was kind of like, I don't want to say mid-career, but I had done 2 books. And my last book was called Girl Culture, and I had spent 5 years looking at, from girls to women all over the world, mostly in the US, but from celebrities to teenagers to models to eating disorder clinic to fat camp to all kinds of experiences around the kind of exhibitionism of modern femininity and the body image struggles. So I was a new filmmaker, but I knew how to make images, and I knew how to get access and get in deep. And I also had a lot of experience with like this body image subject. And girl culture was something that opened doors, both with the people from the clinic, and we spent 2 years just figuring out with the people from the clinic and with HBO how to have it be safe and like do this. It was still a miracle that we did it with HIPAA. I don't think it could ever happen again. But the way that I was able to do it with HBO was I went in with a producer, RJ Cutler, and we pitched it together. And we actually pitched a series based on girl culture, but at that time, HBO wasn't doing
Sheila
series.
hated series.
Yeah, it was like, no series, but we want to do one. And she was like, and I want to do the one about eating disorders. And so we then spent 2 years getting access. And then when we filmed there, and it was in this one clinic in Florida, Sheila had like the genius idea. And I feel like I've been lucky in that I don't like being bombarded with notes, and I don't like making films with any kind of committee, but I do love getting like wisdom and smart creative notes from studios, people like the executives at FX or like Sheila. And Sheila said, stay in the clinic. Because as a photographer, I was going to be like, let's go out with them and let's see. They go back to their families. They're reading Vogue magazine. Like, what happens? And she was like, stay in the clinic. And it became kind of like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and realized that it was like not just about eating disorders, but really could have been about any addiction, any rehab, and the kind of dynamic that goes on there.
Sisterhood. Yeah, it's fun. It's like really fun at times as well.
Yeah, even though it's so hard, it's also like, that kind of girl bonding and being bad girls and almost like Girl Interrupted.
Yeah. And so I'm assuming you agree with this. Like, I see all my films as kind of building blocks, and we all do it differently, I think, as documentary filmmakers, and there's surely no path, especially when we're talking the late aughts or early 2010s. But how did Thin coming out kind of paved the way for you to do the next thing. And I watched the end credits. So Sheila's name, RJ's name. I saw Belisa's name. I was like, this is like the Avengers. Belisa became the head of Hulu Docs later on. There were many other names that I saw in there where I was like, wow, this was 20 something years ago. And look at all these. You guys were probably very young then. Look at all these people that worked on this film together. I think Lisa Heller's name is on it, right? And she's now the head of HBO Docs. So how did that pave the way and forming this network for your next
Well,
project?
really, like RJ Cutler helped me sell it to HBO, and
Had he made a big film yet?
he had done, yes, he had done The War Room. And I think he had done American High maybe at that point. I'm not sure exactly when that was. But
He could get you in the room. With
he got
Sheila.
me in the room. And my, I mean, it's the kind of film, and I'm the kind of filmmaker where 90% of it we just did on our own. Like, we weren't really that involved with either actual reality RJ's company or HBO while we were making it. We were like running around. I didn't even know I needed a producer. So I was the only producer. There were literally just me, DP, sound, and an AP. And it was just the four of us. It was all female team. We were practically living in the clinic. We had a hotel nearby because, especially for the crew, it was like too haunting to stay there. Like, I'd stayed there overnight a few times. I also shot myself at times. It was very, very like gritty, no lighting, no interviews, basically, just really running around. I probably spent half of my time negotiating access. It was a place that was like very up and down. We would join. It was a place that was based on like groups and group therapy in a way that was a foreshadowing for the groups in social studies. And that kind of very special, interesting, sometimes explosive dynamic of a group. And we would join the groups not filming once a week so that the community could have the opportunity to say, like, I wasn't comfortable when you were filming, or I have something I want to tell you guys, or I don't want you to film me anymore, or you are blocking my view. And amazingly, like, we really didn't get much of that because I think it was such a kind of community of contagion that when everybody was like when we had a critical mass on board with us, the rest of the people would be on board with us. But then as we started to thin out, and as I was following like the last character who was still there and then not filming the other people as much, then it got hard because they're also really competitive for attention. And so it was important for us to not have like main characters, but just to be really like focused on the community. But, inevitably, as you follow people, it becomes more clear that you're following a particular person's story. And so we had to kind of balance that out with group sessions and filming other people.
Wow. Yeah, it becomes the political part of filmmaking or the relationship part of filmmaking. I want to keep moving on because we'll run out of time. Do you want to watch something from Generation Wealth?
Yeah.
I know that's not your next film. Your next film, I believe, was Queen of Versailles, but we were going to end with Queen of
Yes.
Versailles. You want to watch Generation?
So Generation Wealth was a 25-year retrospective about my photography and film work, all looking at wealth, but not wealthy people, but our aspiration to wealth and our addiction to wealth and the kind of culture of consumerism and how it affects us. And as I was going on this journey with very extreme people like Florian Home, who was a white-collar criminal who was on the FBI's most wanted list and ended up having a huge fall. And as I was talking to him and he was telling me about his workaholism and how the money was never enough, he said, you know what I'm talking about, because he could see that I was in Germany, on my way to Iceland, had little kids at home. He's somebody that I knew from college, which was Harvard. So he knew that I was like kind of also a workaholic. And that motivated me to start including my own story in the Generation Wealth Project. So I'm going to show you this clip about that. Are you me? Are you on a filming boycott?
Yes. Stop!
Why do you think I have a problem?
You're filming every second of our lives?
Do you think I'm a workaholic?
A workaholic? Yeah, like. And your mom is even more than you.
And do you think Noah's similar?
Yeah, Noah is a little Lauren, definitely.
Noah might be more intense than me.
1, 2, 41, 3, 4, light and quick.
Where did the addiction to work come from, do you think?
I think it came from you. I think you're a way bigger workaholic than I am.
No, you're a way bigger workaholic than I am. How long is the longest you've gone on a shoot? I would say 6 weeks or 2 months. I never went away that long. Never.
I don't know, I had a lot more time with Dad.
Did Dad kind of compensate?
Yeah.
You made Frank have that very close connection, which has sustained us since that time. It allows me to travel and do the work.
I just kind of grew up with you not really being around. It sounds kind of bad, but I think the damage is already done. Are you okay? Yeah?
I love this clip just because it gives such a peek into you and Frank and your sons, who I don't know. But I was telling Lauren yesterday, it was sort of like haunting me watching this clip, because you can't help but think, I'm sure there's a lot of filmmakers in here who think about this work-life balance a lot, and I'm sure you do, especially as a mother. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I guess I mean, for one, it was actually my editor's idea in a way to include me. Like when I was filming these interviews, I didn't know that this was the part I was going to use, but I also felt like I was somebody who had spent a career asking people to tell me their kind of innermost secrets and personal lives for a very big audience, and I felt like when it became relevant, I had to be willing to also turn the camera on myself. And also, it was a way in for the audience, because a lot of my characters in this project were hard to relate to. Whether it was Florian, who was like a master of the universe, like Wolf of Wall Street type, or Davney, who was the porn star that went on the bender with Charlie Sheen, or Kathy, who was addicted to plastic surgery. They had these very intense addictions, which I felt like were common, but not to that extreme. Like, a lot of my work had been kind of looking at the extremes to really investigate the mainstream. Like, I had spent a lot of time on body image, and eating disorders were kind of like the most pathological side of that, and kind of like using your body really as your voice. But it's something that people who don't have an eating disorder can also connect with. And so I could see that the audience was having a hard time relating. And in a way, my story was a little bit more ordinary. At first, I thought it was too boring to include, But then when my son was like, the damage is done, I realized it wasn't that boring. It was actually really hard, but in a way that I thought was relatable because in work, we do get so wrapped up in that. And it does seem like the culture is just going faster and faster. And like compared to like my grandfather was a successful insurance broker and left the office at 5 o'clock every day and had like hobbies and a social life. And because we're fortunate to have work that we love, I've always had it as a passion. And so I don't have like a lot of hobbies or, and so I wanted to explore that. And really they brought that out. Like I was not expecting Noah to say that. And once he did, it really made me think. And then it really changed the interview I did with my mom, which ended up being a kind of intense interview also about abandonment, because she was like a very successful professor and had always worked and was kind of like a feminist role model, but also not always there in the way that a kid wanted. And so it just made me like push into all of that.
And so Noah says the damage has been done. And again, we did this a little bit out of order chronologically of your filmography, but I'm going to use that as a segue back then, because I'd imagine, I don't know how old he is here, but I would imagine a lot of those years that he's referring to are the Queen of Versailles years, when I'm guessing both of your sons were alive and around. Can you talk, I mean, Queen of Versailles, when I introed you at the beginning and saying like Lauren makes films that people watch, that's still one of the films that people from growing up where I grew up in Georgia, well, people will say, have you ever seen a Queen of Versailles? You know, it's one of those documentaries that was, I think, a real tentpole, a real moment in time, really cut through. How did you, we were talking a little bit about it yesterday and it surprised me. The making of that documentary, can you tell the audience about how you got it off the ground and how difficult it actually was?
Yeah, it was impossible to finance, and it came out of a real down period economically, which I think is kind of interesting to think about with the time we're in right now, where everything is hard. There's very little money for films. There's little production. One of the things that has always happened for me is that my personal work has really thrived in downturns. Like when there isn't the opportunity to make money, and sometimes money making opportunities can be golden handcuffs or they can distract you. And it's always been really important to us to just kind of keep our eye on the prize, make money when you can, but use Peter to pay Paul for the personal projects. So I started to do advertising once I had a kid so that I could like have some help and not do everything, have some income, have some help in the studio, not do everything myself. And I had been doing a lot of print advertising, and then like the .com crash happened and it was completely dead, just like crickets. And my studio manager, I was like, do you want to produce? Like she had never produced a film. And basically, we met Jackie. I met Jackie photographing a Versace. I was photographing Donatella Versace for Elle magazine, like a pretty small, like 3-day assignment for Elle magazine. And I met this woman, and I heard she was building the biggest house in America, but I didn't really know if it was true, and I kind of forgot about her. But she said, if you're ever in Florida, come see me. And I was like, great, I'd love to photograph you sometime. And then it was like 2 years later, I was in Florida doing another photo shoot, and I had a dead day. And I said, whatever happened to that lady? And we called her, and she said, come and photograph. And I was like, well, can you recommend a hotel near you? And she's like, no, we have plenty of room. Come stay at the house. So my assistant and I went and stayed there, and I went and made pictures, and I was like, this is a movie. Like at the time, they had this 26,000 square foot starter home, and they were building the biggest house in America. But I was like, I thought that was interesting, but it was kind of like the afterthought. I was so fascinated by this character and by their house, which seemed like this microcosm of the American dream with the immigrant nannies and housekeepers and this kind of strange dysfunctional family.
The marriage, yeah, it's such a huge, huge part of it.
So should I show the clip from Queen
Yeah,
of
we
Versailles?
have 10 more minutes.
I'm going to just skip over this generation wealth, but I just wanted to, we talked about cutting through the noise. And so this was an exhibition of generation wealth and a book. So we just kind of worked and still work in a multi-platform way.
It's like diversifying your portfolio, which you've done such a good job of. It's not just the documentaries. There's so many arms off of them.
Yeah, but I think the important thing is, like, I love all of them. Like, I'm not doing one thing to make money and then this is my passion. Like, and sometimes photo is up and documentaries down, or documentaries up, photo. When I did Thin, I thought it would be my first and only doc, but then I just got the bug and loved it. I'm gonna skip over the Kingmaker and show Queen of Versailles.
Oh, look at the doggies eating the cockroach.
I grew up in a 1-bathroom, 3-bedroom house, and I can remember I would have to wait in line to use the bathroom. In this house, we have, I think, 17 bathrooms. In our new house, we have 30 bathrooms. So you won't have to keep your legs crossed very long.
The reason why we really want the bigger home, for one thing, I think my husband deserves it. I think it'd be like a lifetime achievement. I think he's worked so hard. And even though this house, which is 26,000 square feet, is so big, we're bursting out of the seams.
I'm gonna go look at our new house, okay?
Look at this thing. Oh my God.
We went to France and we saw Versailles, and we were inspired by the French architecture.
I drew it on the back of an envelope on my way to Las Vegas. In Las Vegas, we looked out our window and we kind of copied the top 3 floors of the Paris Hotel. Probably should have used smaller envelopes because it turned out to be the largest home in America.
We never sought out to build the biggest house in America. It's like kind of happened.
This is so beautiful.
This is our grand ballroom. We have the grand staircase on each end.
It's a palace. Can you imagine, like, the dances and the parties?
I said, well, I'd like to have a bowling alley. And then he says, I want a health spa. And then I said, we need maids' quarters.
I forgot how many kitchens, 10 kitchens. We have a sushi bar.
2 tennis courts, 1 will be a stadium court, full-size baseball field, which will double as the parking lot when we have parties.
But this is our ice skating / roller rink.
The children have their own wing. They have their playroom with a stage where they can perform and do their little whatever they do.
Okay, this is the staircase that I would come up if I was going to visit the children.
We wanted to put everything that we could dream of in this home.
And we're gonna have like an orchestra up here. For black tie affairs.
The house will be filled with Louis XIV type antique furniture.
That's our observation deck. Every night we go up there to watch the Disney fireworks. So by the time we both got what we wanted, now it's 90,000 square feet.
Jackie, is this your room?
No, that's not my room.
Where's your room?
That's my closet.
No way. No way. Where's David's closet?
Oh, that's his
closet.
This is my husband's closet.
All right, this is it.
My husband filled the garages up with our marble from China. Like, this is what $5 million worth of marble looks like. I gotta go kiss my dog. My husband knew how special Chanel was to me, so he had her stuffed for me. And now she's upstairs. And this one, a staff member ran over him in the driveway, but now he's on my piano.
So you ask me why I'm building the largest home in America? And my answer is because I could.
You mentioned being a kingmaker and having a big role in the 2000 election.
I sure did. I got George W. elected president. Personally got him elected president.
It is nice to be here with so many good folks from the great state of Florida.
Businessman David Siegel says America owes a lot to him.
I think we are responsible for George Bush becoming president.
Now, had I not stuck my big nose into it, there probably wouldn't have been an Iraqi war, and maybe we might have been better off, I don't know.
How were you personally responsible for the re-election of George Bush?
I rather not say it, because it may not necessarily have been legal.
So this clip is incredible, obviously. And then what happens, if you haven't seen this is one of those documentaries that takes like a total seismic shift when I guess you were shooting during the 2008 stock market crash and real estate industry crash. So this couple's finances completely falls apart. So the second half of the film is totally different than this. Did you know? Were you shooting before that happened?
Yeah, so it becomes a kind of supersized foreclosure story, and I didn't know it would happen to them. Like they were building this house, and that was kind of the premise that we started with. But then 2 years after the stock market crash in 2010, the whole thing just hit them, all of the overextended, because it was timeshare, and so people were not paying theirs, and then they couldn't sell them, and then it hit the big boys, and then they turned out were gambling everything, and their homes and business went into foreclosure, and they lost their biggest business too.
And why do you think that this film cut through? Because I do, in a way, like I'm just using all those anecdotal people from Georgia who still talk about this film. But do you think it cut through, and why? And what part of
We were really lucky. Well, we were unlucky, and then we were lucky. We were unlucky because nobody would fund it, because none of the social impact documentary people wanted to have anything to do with them. And so we raised some money in Europe, but even the Germans were like, unless they're homeless, we don't want to touch it. And then once they started losing everything, like we knew we had something. And so we just kept going. And Frank, my husband's like super supportive of like, you got to tell your story. We ended up taking out a home equity loan. And then if we hadn't sold our movie, we could have lost our house, which would have been a crazy backstory to them. But we ended up getting opening night of Sundance, and we ended up selling it for theatrical to Magnolia, who did a great theatrical, and that was in the time when documentaries were filling seats in theaters. And then for TV, we sold it to Bravo, and then it went on CNBC. And then Netflix was just coming up then, and it was kind of like the first documentary to really hit on Netflix.
Like DVDs still? That era? Streaming was started.
And so everybody like saw it on Netflix. And so
people watch it because Bravo was, I don't think
Bravo
was a typical buyer of documentaries.
No,
even back then.
I pitched it to Bravo. And they bought it, and then I pitched it to Bravo because we had the theatrical, so we wanted the theatrical, so we couldn't do like the HBOs, and then Bravo ended up leading into The Real Housewives, and so it was like this crazy like high-low thing where we had the art house Magnolia and film festivals. And then we had like the lowbrow, like Real Housewives. And it ended up being a great formula because the thing about this movie is you go in thinking like, oh, these silly people like Schadenfreude and like, you know, rich people and look at their crazy house. But then it ends up when you go through the financial crisis, what you see is that the kind of greed that drove their overextending themselves was what drove every level of like working class, middle class. It's what caused the 2008 financial crisis. And timeshare, which was David's business, was really a metaphor for all of these bad loans.
And I'm being told that we need to wrap up, but just so 2 final questions, maybe you could answer them at the same time, because can you tell people what's happening with Queen of Versailles? And then also, Lauren and I discussed this yesterday, it's a difficult documentary market right now, but we don't want to end on a depressing note. Like, what would your final thoughts, especially for young filmmakers in here looking up to people like yourself, what would your final advice be for them from all of these different experiences?
Well, I
that
won't
you've had?
end on the bad news. I'm going to end actually on the good news, which is that Queen of Versailles is going to Broadway. It opens next month, and I'm going to show you the trailer for that.
On Broadway this fall, Kristen Chenoweth reunites with the composer of Wicked, Stephen Schwartz, in a lavish new musical based on a wild, true-life saga.
Put me on with somebody who knows what they're talking about. Get up, honey.
With F. Murray Abraham.
I'm on the phone. Action.
I'm Jackie Siegel. I'm building the largest private home in America.
Kristen Chenoweth
It
is
is an exact replica of the Palace of Versailles.
the Queen of Versailles.
You know the big one in France?
Broadway previews begin October 8th.
Oh.
So amazing. Also, by the way, such a testament to a great title. Like that title, Queen of Versailles, I think is so indelible that it's a part of that recipe of success. So we'll all go see it when we're in New York. But what is your final advice for young filmmakers in this room that are looking to build a career in documentaries?
I think follow your heart, follow your passion. The work is too hard and not enough money to do it for any other reason than you have to tell that story. And like Gina was saying, like, stay with it, stay with your story, fight for your story. Don't compromise. And then try to get it from your story to the audience. I'm really excited that, like, with the Broadway show, we're even showing the movie again. And so, and that's the silver lining of streaming, is like Thin is still on HBO and like people come to it. And so it does have these long, lives that if you kind of stay with enduring truths, they will come around and have a life.
Yeah. And I feel like you've really like kind of bet on yourself, invested, and Frank. I mean, maybe don't do the home equity loan thing that they did, but I love that career path that you've showed to us of really investing in your own projects. I don't even mean just financially. I mean the time, keeping the IP like you've done, even with your photography background, and really not being tempted always by the forbidden apple. I think there is a really susceptible. There's a lot of temptation out there, like you were talking, agents, managers, studios, streamers, and I feel like your career has been a real model in autonomy, I guess is what I'm
And
trying to
sometimes
say.
it's the silver lining you don't expect. Like, we would have sold Queen of Versailles to anybody while we were trying to raise the money at the end, and we didn't. As a result, we ended up mostly owning it, and then who would know, like, a decade later, we would have the chance to make a musical, and it's ours. It's not like it doesn't belong to Netflix or somebody else.
Totally. Well, thank you for all the films you've given us. Thank you for being such a wonderful role model for so many of us. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
And Ryan's an amazing filmmaker. Watch all of his movies.